Hello to everyone online. My name is Vanessa Oldroyd. I'm a researcher from social marketing at Griffith in Australia. I'm presenting Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, Stakeholder Insights into Plastic-Free Supermarkets. This session shares findings from a systems social marketing study examining ways to reduce or eliminate plastic packaging in supermarkets. Throughout the session, we will take a deep dive into system-level change, seeking to understand how policy, corporate social responsibility, and consumer behaviour intersect to drive sustainable supermarket practice. Before we begin, I'd like to share how my childhood experiences have shaped my views on human behaviour and environmental sustainability. I was born in Darwin, the Northern Territory, and grew up alongside First Nation people, many of whom I consider my dear friends and family. Exploring rivers, coastlines, and bushland, I learned early the importance of living in balance with nature. We acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as well as Indigenous cultures globally, have lived in harmony with the land, water, sky, and sea for tens of thousands of years. There is much to learn from how Aboriginal people's values and behaviours are grounded in caring for the environment. As plastic pollution is a global phenomenon, we extend our respect to all Indigenous cultures and tribal communities, both internationally and locally, who continue to protect and nurture the natural systems that sustain us all. Behaviour change is profoundly shaped by the environments in which it takes place. Thaler and Sunstein, 2003, describe how altering external structures can guide behaviour while preserving freedom of choice. Social marketing scholars Tapp and Rundle-Teely support this notion, suggesting that designing environments which enable desirable behaviours establishes optimal conditions for lasting change, while systemic blockages can, in fact, inhibit action. Let's take a moment to think about your weekly shopping trip. It's almost impossible to find products that are not wrapped or transported in single-use plastic. And when it comes to plastic-free options, are they easy or convenient? In most cases, the answer is no. The widespread use of single-use plastic in supermarket environments presents a persistent challenge to sustainable waste management. Despite increasing regulatory pressures and growing consumer demand for environmentally responsible practices, single-use plastics continue to be the dominant packaging format used in the retail sector. As key intermediaries within the packaging value chain, supermarkets occupy a pivotal role in facilitating both upstream and downstream change. Their position enables them to influence packaging design and procurement decisions, shape waste management practices, and ultimately guide consumer behaviour. Despite the importance of these factors, there remains limited empirical evidence on how environmental restructuring can enable reductions in single-use plastics. This reinforces the need for systemic inquiry into what prevents supermarkets from offering plastic-free service environments and how restructuring conditions across the supply chain may unlock meaningful change. This study addresses a critical gap in the literature by applying a systems social marketing lens to explore how supermarket retailers can reduce or eliminate single-use plastics within their service environments. Previous studies have focused separately on consumer behaviour or on policy interventions in isolation. However, very few have brought together perspectives from across the packaging value chain to uncover leverage points for systemic change as emphasised by Meadows. In addition, behavioural frameworks such as the motivation, opportunity and ability model have mainly been applied in downstream contexts, overlooking their potential to inform organisational and policy-level interventions. This study is anchored in the motivation, opportunity and ability, or MOA framework, which conceptualises behaviour change as a function of internal drivers through motivation and ability and external environmental conditions or opportunity. While MOA has been widely applied in downstream social marketing to influence individual behaviour, its use at organisational and systems levels remains limited. This study adapts MOA to examine how supermarket retailers can reduce single-use plastics within complex service environments. To deepen the analysis, it draws on the MOAB extension, which incorporates behavioural segmentation and recognises the interplay between individual and structural factors. The COMB model and the behaviour change wheel are also referenced to support the conceptualisation of behaviour as a product of capability, opportunity and motivation. MOA is prioritised for its explicit focus on marketing levers and its compatibility with systems thinking. Extending MOA to meso and macro level actors reframes environmental opportunity as a central mechanism for change and provides a systems-informed model for intervention design. Finally, the study is contextualised by the circular economy model and waste management hierarchy, which underpins South Australia's policy landscape and provide the foundation for understanding the broader sustainability context in which supermarket retailers operate. A case study design was employed to gain insight into South Australia's waste management strategy and how stakeholders reassess, dismiss or implement new practices. The MOA framework was adapted to understand the internal and external drivers influencing the elimination or reduction of single-use plastic in supermarkets, ensuring a system-wide view of the entire supply chain. Motivation and ability were coded from the focal system lens, while opportunity reflected the broader perspective of the plastic packaging value chain. Synthesizing system-wide knowledge required understanding three key elements: motivation, what could potentially move supermarkets to reduce single-use plastics; ability, the extent to which they possess the skills and knowledge for sustainable waste management; and opportunity, the the external environmental factors outside their control. Purposive and snowball sampling were used to recruit participants. Recruitment drew on stakeholder analysis, team and partner networks, and LinkedIn referrals. In total, 26 government and organisational stakeholders were interviewed. A modified version of McHugh's and co-authors' stakeholder identification protocol informed the sampling strategy, while Parkinson and co-authors' MOAB model guided the interview process. The sample included representatives from state and local government, academia, packaging, waste, recycling, food manufacturing and wholesale, plastic production, supermarket retail, and environmental NGOs. A summary of the findings across the MOA constructs will be outlined through the following slides. Stakeholders identified both intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Corporate social responsibility and consumer demand were strong internal drivers, while regulatory compliance and reputational risk shaped external pressures. However, cost concerns, packaging trade-offs, and supply chain complexity often diluted motivation. A food distributor mentioned that to go to a compostable fresh produce bag, it's almost a 400% increase. Opportunities were shaped by policy frameworks, infrastructure, and market dynamics. Government grants, harmonised waste systems, digital technologies, and extended producer responsibility, or EPR schemes, were seen as enablers. Barriers included national waste reform, waste management infrastructure, and a lack of consumer education. A plastic manufacturer highlighted the utility of utilising a digital watermark, stating that all sorts of information are gathered about the package, which enhances collection and sorting. Retailers' ability to implement plastic-free solutions depended on internal capacity, training, and partnerships. Independent retailers demonstrated innovation through the use of refill stations and bring-your-own container systems. The purchasing power of retailers can influence sustainability decisions across the food supply chain. A supermarket retailer outlined that delis are a high-use area for single-use plastics, with plastic containers, wrap, and many other forms, for example, plastic barcodes. And there are a few initiatives in this space already. Thematic analysis identified 16 secondary themes, revealing key insights across the 3 MOA constructs. A summary is presented in the following table, along with the restructured conceptual model outlined in the next slide. Motivation enablers were corporate social responsibility, consumer demand, bag levies, and brand loyalty. The barriers included cost, packaging trade-offs, supply chain complexity. Opportunity, the enablers were EPR schemes, grants, harmonised waste systems, and packaging standards. The limitations were LCA limitations, curbside collection, and consumer behaviour. For ability, The enablers were purchasing power and plastic-free initiatives, while the barriers included operational constraints and a lack of technical expertise. Findings suggest reordering the MOA constructs would offer a more accurate reflection of organisational behaviour. The results indicate that structural opportunities such as infrastructure, policy alignment, and market readiness are enablers of both ability and motivation. A reordering of the MOA framework to OAM, opportunity, ability, motivation, is proposed, positioning structural and systemic conditions as the primary enablers of change. This reconfiguration offers a more accurate lens for designing upstream interventions, capturing the tactile knowledge of plastic packaging stakeholders operating within complex policy and market environments. This research delivers a novel theoretical perspective and practical guidance for sustainability strategists, policymakers, and researchers. By centering environmental restructuring, the study offers a more contextually grounded lens through which to analyse and overcome systemic barriers to SUP reduction in supermarkets. It underscores the imperative for coordinated system-wide responses to transition from linear to circular packaging models. It informs the design of policy and corporate strategies that support structural readiness for sustainable practice. The findings reaffirm the utility of stakeholder-informed system-based approaches in advancing circular economy objectives and extending the theoretical and practical boundaries of social marketing. Despite its contributions, this study has several limitations. First, the research was geographically bounded to South Australia, which may limit the generalisability of findings to other jurisdictions with different regulatory or market conditions. Second, while the qualitative design enabled rich insights, it does not allow for quantification of the relative influence of each MOA construct. Third, the study focused on macro and meso-level stakeholders. Future research should incorporate consumer perspectives to triangulate findings and explore downstream implications. Considering the above-mentioned limitations, future research should test the OAM model across diverse sectors and geographies to assess its utility in other complex systems. Longitudinal studies could also examine how shifts in policy or infrastructure influence the relative weight of each construct over time. Additionally, mixed method approaches could quantify the impact of specific interventions aligned with each OAM dimension, offering further guidance for practitioners and policymakers. By reframing the MOA model to prioritise structural opportunity, this study provides a novel theoretical contribution that enhances the explanatory power of social marketing in addressing systemic environmental challenges. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this presentation. This project represents the second phase of a broader three-part study. If you'd like to learn more about this research, I invite you to connect with me via email or LinkedIn. I would also like to acknowledge the invaluable support of my supervisors, Professor Sharon Rundle-Teely and Professor Timo Dietrich, and to thank the government and organisational professionals who contributed their time and expertise to bring this work to fruition. Feel free to reach out to Sharon and Timo as well if you would like to learn more about the project. To conclude, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Thinking in Systems, a primer by Donella Meadows. Her profound insights have deeply influenced how I understand complex, dynamic systems and the importance of co-creating solutions with stakeholders to identify leverage points for change. Donella writes, "We can't impose our will on a system. We can listen to what the system tells us and discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than could ever have been produced by our will alone." On that note, bye for now, and I wish you all the best for the upcoming conference. Thank you.